Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Katrina Davis, and I'm the program manager at the Georgia Center for Oncology Research and Education, also known as Georgia Core. And we're so happy to have you here today for part one of the Self-Advocacy Series that we are hosting with the GC3 Survivorship Advocacy Council. And the session is called Your Voice, Your Power, Self-Advocacy Series. This first part will be focused on advocating for yourself during cancer treatment as a survivor. And we have some guest panelists today that will take turns answering questions about how you can navigate certain conversations to make sure you're advocating for yourself in the best way possible. All right, so I see a lot of people in the chat box. Hi to everyone. All right, so I'll get started. So for a few housekeeping rules, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A box. You can also ask them in the chat box if you want to, and we'll be checking that throughout the webinar. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the presentation. There will be an opportunity at the end to come off of mute if you want to and ask your question out loud, if that makes you feel comfortable. And just as a disclaimer, this webinar is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained in this webinar with other sources and review all of that information with your medical team. So June, as you all may know, is Cancer Survivor Month. So every day, but especially in June, we celebrate and honor cancer survivors near and far. This month, we're celebrating survivors by sharing stories, resources, and hosting webinars that are relevant to the concerns that cancer survivors have. If you are a cancer survivor, we definitely welcome and ask that you join us by sharing your story in our Voices feature on our website, which is at georgiacancerinfo.org. And you can also share a personal blog in our inspirational blog section. Find more information at georgiacancerinfo.org/survivorship. And Georgia Core, for all that don't know, is a statewide nonprofit that leverages partnerships and innovation to attract more clinical trials, increase research, and promote education to improve cancer care for Georgians in rural, urban, and suburban areas across the state. In just 2 decades, Georgia Core's work has contributed to more clinical trials and clinical discoveries within the reach of Georgians, ensuring that access to advances in care and support are more equitable across minority, rural, and underserved populations. We've helped improve the quality of care for patients and also the quality of life for survivors, and we've helped decrease cancer mortality rates. The GC3 Survivorship Advocacy Council that is helping co-host this webinar tonight is actually a diverse group of advocates that support advocacy and education efforts for survivorship. It's made up of people from different backgrounds, such as being a cancer survivor, nurses, doctors, and researchers. It was formed from the survivorship work group of the Georgia Comprehensive Cancer Control Program, also known as GC3. The Advocacy Council comes together to develop materials about cancer survivorship, develop materials that can be shared with legislators, develop and host educational sessions about cancer survivorship, such as this one. The Advocacy Council has been very pivotal with helping us share the resources that we recently produced, and I'll share more about that later, to the whole state of Georgia, and we thank them for their participation and engagement with us. If you or someone you know would like to participate in the council, they can email me at kdavis@georgiacore.org. So let's talk about self-advocacy. If you would like to, just drop in the chat what you think that means. The word sounds intimidating to some, but it's actually not as intimidating as it really is. Advocacy can take on many different forms. It is not just limited to the big advocacy that you see on TV or going up to your state legislator's office and asking for something. It can also be advocating for yourself on an individual level, and that's something that we call self-advocacy. . 。 . 。 . 。 . .
。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 .
. Self-advocacy is arming yourself with the tools and the skills that are necessary for you to feel comfortable asserting yourself and communicating clearly about your cancer needs. So that could mean talking to your provider about how you want your treatment path to look, or asking questions so that you feel more comfortable with what's being told to you. It means that you're taking responsibility for some control of your life's journey. Just give me one moment. All right. Just wanted to cut down that interference. So it means that you're speaking up for yourself, and you're making sure that your voice is heard. Here are a couple of ways that you can self-advocate for yourself during your cancer journey. One would be learn about the type of cancer that you have. When you do research about your type of cancer, you can feel more comfortable knowing what might be presented to you. You can also know what questions that you might need to ask about it. Second, request a picture of your whole treatment plan up front. It might make you feel more comfortable if you can see everything that might happen opposed to getting it piece by piece. So request what you need so that you feel more comfortable. Request timelines for receiving your diagnosis, test results, surgery if needed, and anything else that you might need for your care. I don't know about you, but I know I like knowing when I can expect to receive something. So if the doctor says you should get this in 1 to 2 weeks, that makes me feel more comfortable than them saying, look out for your results. So make sure you ask so that you can know when to expect that information. Next, ask your care team more questions and let them know how you're feeling. If you're feeling like you don't understand something, don't be afraid to speak up and ask for what you need. If you're feeling really nervous or unsure, let them know about that too. A lot of times they can connect you to individuals such as navigators that might be able to talk through a lot of things with you, or even social workers that can help work through some more issues that you might have. Next, discuss the information that you find online with your healthcare team. I know that I like to Google everything. I'll Google and I'll know more than the doctor knows by the time I get to my appointment. But it's really important that you validate that information with the doctor so that they can confirm that this is indeed accurate and indeed applies to your situation. Next, another way that you can self-advocate is consider getting a second opinion about your treatment plan. If you're feeling uncomfortable with what's been told to you, it's okay to seek a second opinion about what you need. And next, call your insurance company. A lot of times we don't necessarily understand everything that the insurance company says they'll cover or not cover, and we need more information. So call them, talk to them about what's being presented to you, what will be covered, what you will need to pay out of pocket, and any other costs that might be associated with your care. Let's talk about some of the benefits of self-advocacy. So if you've done any of the things that we've talked about so far, let us know some of the benefits that you might have encountered. But for us, we found that in research that benefits of self-advocacy can be more insight and knowledge. So being more knowledgeable about your cancer, the treatment plan that you have, anything that might be presented in the future, such as long-term effects of the treatment that you'll have. Connection to others. So when you self-advocate, you'll actually be voicing your opinion about things that are important to you. And that might get you connected to others that feel the same way. That'll get you connected to support groups potentially. That'll get you connected to other care teams that can help support you through your journey. And also improve quality of life. I know that when I speak up for myself, I feel pretty good and I can walk more confidently out of my doctor's office when I know that I've expressed myself confidently. And next, confidence in decision making. So when you are able to advocate for yourself, you will get all of the options laid out for you and you'll be able to make a decision about what's most appropriate. It'll be because you have knowledge about that your situation and you're able to make a great decision. And next, this can reduce anxiety and hopelessness. Sometimes we carry around a lot of questions and concerns and we never get them out. But when we finally do, we can really breathe a sigh of relief that We have the answers that we need, and sometimes they're not always the answer that we want, but when we have an answer, we can just release that anxiety and move forward. All right, so now I'll be introducing tonight's speakers. I think everyone's here. Give me 1 second just to get everyone set. All right, so everyone's here. So I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers for tonight, and then they can tell you a little bit more about themselves once they get on. So first we have Angie Caton. Angie has been involved in the care of people with cancer for the last 34 years. In her current role as assistant nurse manager, she helps to lead the outpatient infusion center, community outreach, patient education programs, and the lung cancer screening program at Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Gainesville, Georgia. Some of her current survivorship project work includes people with colon cancer and their care partners, the use of massage and light touch for survivors and care partners, identifying food insecurity, improving access to cancer rehabilitation, and increasing resources for young adults with cancer. Next, we have Bobbie Menneg, and she was just here, so let me find her really quickly. Give me 1 second. Bobbie, are you there? Okay, there's Bobbie.
Yes.
Welcome. So Bobbie is a cancer survivor who was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in February 2011. Bobbie later founded Beyond the Ribbon, a cancer survivor organization that holds seminars with oncologists, surgeons, genetic counselors, therapists, and much more to empower cancer patients. Additionally, Bobbie has become involved in her community when it comes to fighting, giving back, and paying forward to all that have been touched by this disease. She volunteers with a cancer support group at Northside Gwinnett Medical Center, the American Cancer Society's Hope Fashion Show, and also Relay for Life's Gwinnett County Survivor Reception. Welcome, Bobbie.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tiah Tomlin. Tiah Tomlin is an advocate, a cancer coach, and a breast cancer educator. After overcoming triple negative breast cancer, she launched My Breast Years Ahead, a online sisterhood created to help women who have been affected by cancer living in the greater Atlanta area. She uses this group to connect women, share resources, and provide support, ensuring that no sister walks this journey alone. Tiah also co-founded My Style Matters Incorporated, a 501c3 grassroots nonprofit organization that is dedicated to supporting, empowering, advocating, and educating cancer survivors, caregivers, and the community at large about cancer and cancer risk reduction in an effort to end disparities. It is Tiah's life's mission to educate, motivate, and activate people to take charge of their health. Welcome, Tiah. All right, so thank you all for joining us today. I want to give you just a moment to share your story and ultimately what led you to us today. And we'll start with Angie.
Oh, I am so honored to be here tonight. I am not a cancer survivor, but as Katrina mentioned, I have spent nearly all of my nursing career working with people who have cancer in various aspects. So what I see as my role or my mission or my purpose as a nurse is to help people through those journeys. And as Katrina, I took down some notes and I got to thinking about a few things. It's like when she talked about the financial aspects of cancer, it's like you wouldn't go to a mechanic and just bring your car and then just like let them do whatever they want it and expect a bill. it's like, you know, you get an estimate. And so it's like planning and thinking about, you know, what does this cancer treatment cost and how it's going to impact me. And those are things when you're dealing with the diagnosis, we see it time and time again that people end up on the other side of the financial toxicity. And then as Katrina mentioned, I love the thought of rehab. Because cancer changes your body, and it's trying to make that happen, or trying to have people that are advocating for you for that to happen. And those people that have prehab or rehab that's before your treatment, and then rehab after the treatments are over, and even during the treatment for that matter. But prehab is before your treatment starts, is that there are better outcomes. People do better with their surgeries and their chemo and their radiation if they're stronger and have more strength, you know, to make it through treatments. And then one other note I just put about second opinions. You know, we're talking about being advocates. You know, I always encourage people to get a second opinion. And the first thing they said, they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Well, you're never going to hurt your doctor's feelings for asking for a second opinion, because again, if you were getting when you need a new roof on your house, you just don't get the first person that shows up knocking on your door. You know, you get other opinions and other estimates and things like that. So it's no different in the medical field, that you should seek those second opinions and feel empowered and feel okay about that. And you're not going to hurt your doctor's feelings. But a lot of people will shy away from that, and they say that's what the response they give to me. But I am so excited to be here, and I hope I can give a nurse's view on our role to help you as a survivor of cancer, or if you're going through cancer, which, you know, you are a survivor from the day of diagnosis. So but we are here as a profession to help you, and that's what I hope to offer tonight to you. Thank you.
Unmute Katrina.
Oh, you're next, Bobbie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, my name's Bobbie Menneg, and I am a 10-year triple negative breast cancer survivor. And going through this journey, I have certainly found, like a lot of these other ladies here, is that you have to be your own advocate. And, you know, what does that mean? Yes, questioning that doctor's opinion. You really have to feel comfortable with who I called my oncologist, the captain of my ship. And, you know, the nurses and techs, everybody else was like my shipmates. And it's just, you know, just take a breath and breathe and take someone with you that can listen, because your head's going to be filled with just all the stuff, and you're not going to be able to absorb all the information that's going to get thrown at you. So I've certainly learned a lot. I was very fortunate in my journey, but I feel like I'm going almost full circle, and I learn something new every day, especially when I meet someone newly diagnosed, and you know, you go, oh, that's, you know, didn't think about that. That's a good thing. So I'm super excited to be a part of this panel. I would say survivorship is one of the hardest things after the diagnosis itself, is how do you adjust to this new normal in your life, and you know, taking that step forward. And I'm a firm believer that if you embrace this journey, you're going to come out on the other side just more improved and new, and a new joy for life. So I do hope you learn from some wealth of information that I know we all have for you.
Thank you. Tiah?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tiah Tomlin, and as Katrina shared, I am a triple negative breast cancer survivor. You know, going through this journey, it was quite challenging. It was very tough. I did hit some challenges even with my healthcare team. But, you know, learning what I've learned since then, or while going through the journey and seeing those gaps in supportive services, you know, I really wanted to be a part of the solution. And so founded the My Breast She's Ahead group, founded My Style Matters, because I really wanted to teach people to advocate. You know, I knew, excuse me, I knew about advocacy, but did not know it to the degree that I know it now. And so really want to be able to hold others' hands. Many of us have never experienced this journey to this degree. And so being a integral part of someone else's journey, really giving them the tools and the resources to help themselves and self-advocate is so critical and so important. I didn't have that when I went through. I had my mom, excuse me, but I didn't have someone who had experience in breast cancer. And so I'm happy to be here, happy to share, and really hope that those who are part of the panel and a part of the audience are really taking some of the nuggets that we'll be sharing today. And hopefully you can apply it and have great outcomes.
All right, thank you. So we'll get into a few questions. We'll have the panelists ask questions, and you are also welcome to ask questions in the Q&A box or the chat box as well. So we'll get started with that portion now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen as we do this. All right. So I talked a little bit about some of the benefits of self-advocacy, but I definitely want to hear from your perspective with what you personally encountered. What are the benefits to you and why is it important?
Well, when I think about self-advocacy, you know, there's different definitions. When you look at, there's the professional definition, and then there's the or the healthcare definition, and then there's the individual patient definition. When I think of self-advocacy, I really think about me speaking up for myself to make sure that I get quality of care. And that's key. The key word is quality of care. There's a difference between care and quality of care. And we want to make sure that we're speaking up so that our voices are being heard, and that not only are our voices being heard that's impacting us, but it's also making a difference for others as well. And some of the challenges that I faced was, you know, initially not being heard. You know, sharing that I've been in pain when I was going through treatment, and it took 4 weeks for my doctors to get me to see a pain specialist, to get me to pain management. And, you know, that was not, for me, that was heartbreaking, because here I am, I was young, still young, but young when I was diagnosed. And when I think about that for other people who don't know how to speak up for themselves, who don't know how to, and I don't want to say demand, but sometimes it has to get to that point. Unfortunately, we don't want it to get to that point, but we really, you know, when you think about, kind of Bobbie said, you know, her oncologist is the captain of her ship. Well, yes, they're the captain of your ship, but there needs to be a patient-provider relationship. It needs to be a decision-making between both. And oftentimes when you don't advocate for yourself, you leave your health in someone else's hands. And if you don't advocate, you know, advocacy is also about, is also not only having the conversation and making sure that you're being heard, but it's also doing your own research. It's also learning about your disease, being an informed patient, not just a patient, making sure that you're, again, getting the quality of care that you need and that you deserve, and that you're really understanding what you're going through. So that's kind of how I see self-advocacy. And again, you are in control. I personally feel as though our healthcare team is there to give us the information, to inform us, but ultimately the decision is in our hands. And that's part of self-advocacy.
Tiah, this is, and I just want to echo on some of those things that you said. And just to know that when we teach new nurses that come into the hospital, at least I know I do, is that I give them some scenarios, and we talk about, we're like, who is the expert of their body and their symptoms? It's not you, it's the patient. So just reinforce, you are the expert. You know your body better than any doctor, any nurse, anybody on the healthcare team. Yeah. You know yourself. You know when things aren't right. You know when symptoms are not controlled. You know what works, what doesn't work. And that is the part about being an advocate for yourself, is to say that, look, I know my body. I know this is not right. I know that I've been in pain, and I can't do my activities that I need to do. I can't enjoy my family time. I can't socialize. I can't sleep. It hurts to drive in the car. It hurts, you can't do it. If you get to that level where you're having to explain all that, you really need that team that understands that you are the expert. And if a patient tells you something hurts, it hurts. It doesn't like, oh, I don't think that hurts. So as nurses, that we're not all at that same place a lot of times. So even when you encounter nurses in the healthcare system, and you can say, gee whiz, this is not normal for me. It is an abnormal thing, and I need help, and please listen to me. And so sometimes it's just about listening as healthcare providers, but we need patients and people with cancer to tell us when something is not right, so that we can escalate and help you in those ways.
Yeah. And the other part of that too is, if you don't feel like you're getting the quality of care that you need and you deserve, then you keep going. You keep going up to the next level, to the next level, until you are being heard. The other part is, I call it fire your doctor. Our doctors work for us. We don't work for the doctors. We're the patients, right? So we sought them out. They didn't seek us out. And so if that relationship is not working, it's okay to let your doctor go and seek someone else. And I think that's something that's really important for patients to understand. And sometimes that can be a little scary, especially when you're fighting cancer, when there's a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes we don't want to switch doctors, but it's okay. When I was going through my treatments, I was left vomiting, and no one came over to support me and help me in the midst of my chemo treatment. And I was sitting right across from the nurse's station. No one came over. It was an hour before they came to see me. And I had to tell them, listen, I'll leave and go somewhere else. I don't care if I'm in the middle of my treatment, but I need to know that you're Team Tiah. And if you're not Team Tiah, I have to go somewhere else, because this is my life, not your life. I appreciate the work that you do, but I need to know that you care about me. My breasts aren't sick, I am sick. So, and that's kind of how I see self-advocacy. And again, it's teamwork, us working together to make sure that I get what I need. But I understand I have a big role to play in that, and I have to speak up.
And culturally, the South is famous for the patriarchal relationship with physicians. The physicians know best. They don't want to ask a physician. If a physician tells them something, they're going to do it. And so even if it doesn't feel right, or if it's not, so those are kind of myths that you have to realize that the doctor, again, knows the medical stuff, but your body. And if things aren't right, then again, not to feel bad about seeking second opinions, or again, firing them. You're not getting the support you need. And it's not just the doctor, right? Isn't it like when you call to make an appointment, or you need those results, or it's all that whole picture of that practice. So the doctor might be wonderful, but the practice might not be supportive of you as a person with cancer. And that's just as frustrating as anything, as to not get your results timely, and anyway, and not get calls back.
Yeah, and your care starts at the front desk. It really starts at the front desk. And another thing, you talked about the South. One thing that we as patients recognize is there's some bias, and especially when it comes to Black women in pain. And so it's really important, especially when there's this, this stigma or this belief of certain things when it comes to Black women in particular, that you really have got to speak up and you've got to advocate for yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to get the care that you need.
Definitely. Bobbie, did you want to share your perspective?
Actually, I just experienced this with one of my ladies who is stage 4 leukemia. And, she's running out of treatments, and she came up and we were talking, and she said, I'm getting very frustrated with my doctor, because I feel like he's giving up on me. I feel like he's like, well, I'm throwing my hands up. And she said, I just don't understand it because he's been so wonderful to me and all this time. And I said, well, okay, you got a couple choices here. You can either go to another doctor, choose to go somewhere else, or you go back to him and you tell him exactly what you just told me. This is your life, not his, and you want to live. So this is very personal to you, and you just tell him exactly with all those feelings and emotions that you just told me, and make him listen to you. And it was she went and had this very conversation with him, and he was like, I'm sorry, you're right. You're right. Let's regroup. And so they got back on the same train together, and they're going forward. So, don't be afraid to step up and challenge that doctor, because like Angie said, I think we put our doctors on this pedestal, and I mean, they're human too, but challenge them. They're not the end all. You are your end all and your maker. So you're, like we're all saying here, it's your choice, your body, and you make them listen to you.
Yeah. One thing I want to add too, we're talking about the healthcare system, we're talking about our providers and the medical team, but it's also advocating for yourself when it comes to the payer, right? The insurance companies, making sure that, the medications that you need. Sometimes the doctors will try to prescribe you with a particular medication, and because your insurance company don't cover it, or they look at it as step therapy, you have to take this first and fail before you can go to the next drug. You have to advocate for yourself. So it's not only just with your healthcare team, but it's also even dealing with insurance companies as well. And don't always take no for an answer, even with clinical trials. So that's a whole nother area that we haven't really touched upon.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little later too.
Yep.
So tell me, I know when you first heard your diagnosis, I'm sure the world came crashing down on you, and you probably had to process it. But after you kind of processed things a little bit, what were your first steps in just trying to figure out what to do next? What strategies did you use to find out more about your cancer type and your markers? Tell us about that process.
Bobbie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Tiah, but 10 years ago from when, I was diagnosed, I was not educated enough in tumor markers and just this wealth of information that we have now, and I think we can do a better job of giving that information on the front end, because it's so important, especially if you want to go find clinical trials, if you want to look elsewhere. And from like I say, back when I was diagnosed, I was like, okay, I have triple negative. And now I'm hearing all these, well, what's your tumor marker? And what, and I'm like, I have no earthly idea, So we definitely, as advocates, and Georgia Core, and we're all striving in that direction, is to find this information to give to newly diagnosed patients, so they are given an arsenal for their life.
Yeah. And, I would say when I was diagnosed, I didn't know a whole lot about cancer. I did have a brother that was diagnosed with stage 4 testicular cancer. So I knew from his journey. I didn't know there were different types of breast cancer. As a matter of fact, when I was told it was triple negative, I kind of got excited because I didn't have to take medication for the rest of my life. And that's kind of how I felt, or the next 5 to 10 years. But when I really understood it, I had a young lady to say to me, oh, you have the worst kind there is. And that's when it made me, take a step back and say, okay, I really need to understand this. I really need to research this. And I'm a researcher by nature. And so I just dived into everything that I could to learn, not only, conventional medicine, but also even from an integrative standpoint. just learning everything that I could do to help myself. You know, I had to have an arsenal. Definitely my faith. My faith was a huge part of it, because one of the things that I realized is the battle starts in the mind. If you don't believe in your healing and overcoming this disease, then you put yourself in a position where your body could potentially succumb to the disease. And so I really stood steadfast on my faith. And of course, you know, my family was another part of my tool bag, I call it, you know, my team, my friends, and just really, you know, stood, changed my lifestyle, changed my eating habits, because I understood some of the reasons or the risk factors for being diagnosed with breast cancer. But like Bobbie said, you know, I wish I would have had that team. I wish I would have had a me of who I am today. And, you know, I really believe that this is something that's needed up front. Once a person is diagnosed, I don't feel like enough emphasis was put on, you really need someone by your side to hold your hand through this process. Although they're patient navigators, although they're social workers, you know, oftentimes they don't really share all of the information with you or help you to see why you need them. Because you don't know what you don't know. When you're going through this, you're overcome and overwhelmed by the diagnosis itself. But we truly need someone to hold our hand through this process. And now that social media is booming like it is, people take to social media to connect with other survivors to learn. And that's why I created my group. When I went out seeking for, you know, support from my peers, no one looked like me, you know, and it was older white women. Not that I had a problem with them being older or white women. It's just, I was a 38-year-old young lady that had questions, not only about being young, but also being a Black woman. And the women who were, you know, trying to answer my questions, but unfortunately they just couldn't, because we weren't the same person or having the same experiences in life. And so I really believe it's important that, you know, providers, if there's some kind of way they could really marry them up, even with another patient that may sit on their board, or they may have a team of patient navigators that actually aren't just doing it from a profession standpoint, but they're actually patients that have experience. Because like Angie said, you know, we have a PhD too. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And I do want to have a question for Angie from a nurse's perspective. How can survivors approach the conversation about nutrition and the role that it plays in the outcomes that they may have?
I think that it would first start by the nurse trying to do an assessment or kind of like a survey of what's your current status of eating, looking at your weight. You know, have you lost weight already? Looking at the treatment plan. If you're having surgery, or if you're in chemo or radiation, and will that impact your nutrition, your ability to consume the calories that you need and the foods that you need to stay healthy. So a nurse asking and you being upfront about what your current diet is, about being honest with weight loss. Sometimes people are afraid to talk about weight loss or weight gain, because, you know, not every cancer patient has another like fallacy that every cancer patient loses tons of weight. You know, there are a lot of medications that put the pounds on you, and it's hard to especially hormonal. We see this with men with prostate cancer, women with breast cancer. If they're on a hormonal therapy, they sometimes gain weight. And some of our blood cancers, like multiple myeloma, when they're on steroids and part of their protocol, they tend to gain weight. So working with your nurse to develop a plan to be able to stay healthy. And it might not be that you're able. I had a patient once that was so concerned about eating healthy when she's going through this really rough chemotherapy treatment that causes a lot of nausea and vomiting. And she was talking about these kale smoothies. And I said, okay, I eat kale and everything, but if you're very nauseated, I just don't know how much a kale smoothie is going to help or stay down. So I said, you have to kind of modify it right now. And then when you get to feeling better or in between cycles, then you can get back on that train. So it's a lot of trial and error. And it's also, and I mentioned Katrina mentioned in my introduction, we also have to be aware that not everybody has food, and not everybody has the kind of food that they need to be healthy and to stay healthy. And so when you talk to your nurse, you need to be upfront that if you worry about your food and where your food comes from and that you have food, there are programs out there, and you will never heal properly unless you have good intake in some kind of way. And so it's so important to be honest. And those are embarrassing things. So if I'd say, oh, I don't have any food in my pantry, and I've got to worry about, what I'm going to do, and I've got a family, and, those are really embarrassing topics to say I don't have food. I can't provide, or my spouse can't provide, or my partner can't provide, or I don't have money because I've spent it on medications or traveling to appointments, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. If you don't have food, you don't have food, and you're never going to get better if you don't have food. And even someone that is what we would, if you say your BMI is high, if you're, and what I mean by that is that, if you have maybe some excess pounds, you could still be malnourished, even if you have excess pounds. So to look at people and say, oh, well, how, she looks like she can wait a couple weeks, without eating. It's not true. You need to keep eating. So anyway, that's what I'd say, is to be honest, talk to people, and then to try to prevent that weight loss. If it is the weight loss, that weight loss sometimes is very hard to get back, because what you're losing is muscle most of the time during that cancer weight loss. And that's really hard to replace that muscle. And then with the loss of muscle, there's extra fatigue and inability to do things like you used to do. And it's harder to get back to your normal or your new normal when you don't have the strength to do, regular activities. And so it's just so important to try to eat the best you can. But again, if you don't have the resources, please speak up for yourself. That's being an advocate again for yourself.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And we do have, when I say we, I mean Georgia Core does have a list of resources, and some food delivery services are on there. So if you need that as a resource and a tool for someone, feel free to access that. And that's at georgiacancerinfo.org. All right, my next question is, especially for Bobbie and Tiah, did you have conversations with your providers about late-term effects or long-term effects of long-term side effects of treatment? If you didn't, how might you approach that now, and how might you suggest a survivor have that conversation?
Oh, wow. I don't know about Tiah, but I can definitely say cancer treatments have aged me 10 plus years. It wreaks havoc on your body. And that's another area that the medical profession, advocacy groups, that we definitely could do better in. What are these treatments going to do to me down the road? And that may be hard for them to say, but at least give you some information so you can make, decisions for you. And yeah, gosh, I mean, that's the biggest thing is, your body, what we have done to our body is just, I mean, it's warfare. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And we just need to be better informed, everywhere. What's this treatment going to do to me? Do I have another option to take? Are there, holistic things that I can do? That's all a personal preference, but, eating better, clean, better products in your home. We just need to have better information that goes along with just the medical side. So we treat the whole person and not just that cancer that, the chemo's going after. And Angie, before I can say oncology nurses are the bomb. Everybody knows that if you want something done, your two best friends in the office are the oncology nurse and whoever his secretary is. Those are the two people that I'm telling you, because they are the ones that are going to take care of you. So hats off to you, your profession.
Yeah, I would say in terms of long-term treatments, I mean, that was a discussion that I guess semi had. You know, you ask the question, you know, what are the options that I have? What are the short-term effects that I'll experience, and what are the long-term? And I don't think they put enough emphasis on it. And that's something that needs to be, especially when it comes to fertility. I mean, that is huge for women who really want to have a child. When I asked about it, it was very generic. It was kind of like they just blew over it. And it was, you know, if you want to have a baby, you have an option of, you know, getting your eggs, you know, doing the fertility process and getting your eggs, you know, freeze your eggs, but you don't have time. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? When you say, I don't have time, explain that to me. But to tell a patient they don't have time, that's going to scare the bejesus out of you, you know? And so I think it's really important that we have these conversations long-term. One of the things that I've been doing is working with NCCS up in Washington, D.C. to really advocate so that we could have survivorship plans. Many of us don't understand the impact, or a lot of us may not understand, especially underserved communities who may not be as educated about the disease. They really don't know the impact that it has. And so, you know, down the road, you may have heart issues. You may get sick for something else, and then you have to do, you know, multiple x-rays, or you may have a cancer recurrence. If you don't have this information of what you've already gone through, or, you know, comorbidities, then it makes your quality of life a little bit more challenging. I deal with neuropathy. I was diagnosed in 2015. I deal with neuropathy really bad. Had I known that there were options that could have minimized the effects of neuropathy, the quality of life that I have would be so much better. I don't do the things I used to do because of the neuropathy. I don't go out and enjoy myself like I used to. So now I'm having to find alternative things to do because I can't do what I used to do because my feet hurt so bad. I can't walk for a long, long period of time. And I surely can't put on my heels like I used to because of the neuropathy. And so had I known these things, it would have better prepared me, or I could have, you know, try to have some better options or started some of the alternative treatments sooner, like acupuncture, instead of waiting. You know, when I said I was in pain, these are all the things that I'm expressing, but no one is really giving me the relief that I need. Again, that was, you know, the immediate pain, but then there's the long-term effects that I'm living with neuropathy. And the only answer I get is, oh, well, we don't know when that's going to subside. And so you're having to deal with that. And so you try to learn the new norm, but you still don't have the tools and resources. I don't think that I was prepared for these long-term effects of the disease.
Yeah, Tiah,
or the treatment rather.
Yeah, they, you know, back, well, even now, a lot of doctors will say, oh, neuropathy, it'll go away in a year. Don't worry about it. And, you know, the years go by and you're going, it's not going away. So that we were definitely misled there. And that's definitely something they could be a little more honest with, maybe.
And even chemo brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, chemo brain, sometimes I still deal with that. Yeah, I mean, I'm 5 years out. Yeah.
Yeah, nope, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And for those that are on the line that don't know or haven't had neuropathy, it is a needle-like, pin-like sensation in usually your hands or your feet, and the pain is burning, sharp, relentless, and very few like topical things, like there's no creams, and you know, ice doesn't help. And it's constant, you know. And if you know people that have diabetes, the same complication happens to diabetics very often, that they have different sensations of burning and tingling in their fingers and toes and feet. and it is extremely distressing. And, I had a patient once that played the piano, and, she couldn't play the piano anymore. And, when you have trouble buttoning up your shirt or doing fine motor skills, the neuropathy in your fingers really impacts, again, writing, sewing, anything. If you braid your hair, if you, all kind of like probably mascara, whatever you do with your hands that requires a lot of fine motor, it hurts, it's hurtful. And so those side effects, and something to you, like people listening to you, you can't see neuropathy. You can't see it. So a doctor can't see it. A doctor can't say, oh, she's got neuropathy by touching something or looking at it. They can, by the way, Tiah would do an exam, like if Tiah can't, or if Tiah says she's in pain, but it's harder for the doctors and nurses too, to kind of like own it, or I think that it's harder for us because we can't see it, and we're it's like heartburn, or think of all the different things, nausea. Nausea you can't see either. You can see somebody vomit, but if you have chronic nausea, nobody can see that. And same thing with neuropathy. So it's some of the symptoms that you guys are describing that they're very painful and very distressing, because there are really no good answers to when they're going to resolve, and what drugs. We know drugs that cause them, but depend on your dose and how long you take them. Everybody's so individualized, but anyway, just that.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure if people didn't know what neuropathy, because maybe some people have been very lucky not to have a medication to cause it, but so many of our drugs cause neuropathy.
Yeah. And the other thing, we talk about the physical side effects, but then there's the mental, right? That we don't really address, we don't really talk about. And especially after you've gone through your treatment. There's the mental through treatment, but even after you've gone through treatment, because of the potential, for recurrence. That's something we don't really talk a lot about, or our doctors talk to us about what are the signs and symptoms of a recurrence? If they're just doing blood work and doing those tests, but they're not doing any other tests. And there's a big emotion that people are challenged with, the fear of recurrence. And that's a whole nother topic, which I don't, kind of popped open the can of worms, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that really is a big deal.
It is body image. What is you talked about, whether you're fatigued or you're gaining weight, a surgical scar, a port, like if you still having a port, somebody sees you wearing a tank top or something, and somebody sees that lump, somebody's going to ask you what's your story, and have to tell the story over and over and over and over and over again, why you have a portacat, or, why you might have a scar somewhere, depending on what you're wearing. Yes, the fear of recurrence is just dreadful, for a lot of our patients, and some take it day by day, and then others just worry every single day, single lump, change in their body, or get really worried. And so that's something that it's too bad that we can't address these things or talk about them at the beginning of treatment. There's so much to learn and so much to know, but to get some of these hot topics out in the open, and so that people aren't afraid to talk about them. Because you might think that you're alone in that fear of recurrence, but, everybody is scared of something coming back. And, because what you've been through, and you don't know if you have the strength to do it again. You don't know if you have the money to do it again, are your friends ready to help you again, or, those kind of things. So, I agree that there are so many psychosocial mental health aspects of cancer care that get kind of pushed back, because it's like treatment, cure, get that. They figured if they can cure you, the rest will fall into place. That's what a lot of philosophy is with a lot of people. Cure them parents of young people, they just cure, and they don't not necessarily caring about that sperm banking or that egg retrieval. Let's hurry up and get that done. And then what is the young person left with 10 years from there when they are cured? Inability to have children, and And then how do you tell a partner that, you know,
Yeah.
they set themselves up for so many other things if they don't have that choice or that discussion right up front. So I think we can do so much better about giving options, and maybe you're not ready to hear it that first day, but then there's a second week and there's a third week. It's better to hear it at the beginning than to wait till 10 years later when you're trying to have a child. Anyway, that's
You know, Angie, I think that's so true, and it just hit me when you said that you know, we just treat oh, sorry about my dogs. We just treat when we're walking in the door the medical side of it.
Mhm.
And it's like, if we could get, I am so sorry.
I'll go to the next question, Bobbie. So, this is specifically for Angie, but I definitely want to hear your perspective on when survivors should approach the question about clinical trials. So should survivors be asking their doctors about clinical trials, or should their doctor be matching them up with the clinical trials? Can you walk us through that process and how they might approach that?
So anytime you're diagnosed with cancer, your physician should examine the opportunity for a clinical trial. And, you know, so many people believe or have fears, and Tiah, you know, you talk about the different biases and issues of the past with clinical trials and different populations, because we have a very terrible history in the United States of clinical trials being performed without the appropriate consents and information and all that. But, you know, we have a lot of safeguards in now that those things should not and can't. I guess they could potentially happen, but there are extensive reviews and safeguards put in place to be an advocate for a patient. So for example, when I say they passed a Tuskegee syphilis experiment where African-American men were injected with syphilis, and they were allowed to have syphilis for very long periods of time when there was a cure, penicillin. You know, when it first started, there wasn't a cure, then a cure was developed, but they still let those men continue to have syphilis through clinical trials, and they didn't know what they were doing. They called it bad blood. They thought they didn't know what they had. They didn't know what they weren't being treated for. Anyway, so we have a bad taste in our mouth with a lot of people with clinical trials. But you should be asking your doctor, if they don't bring it up, you should say, is there a clinical trial available for me? And what clinical trials do is offer the best of the best for you. And not that your doctor won't offer the best treatment for you, but there might be something that shows a lot of promise that is nearly ready to roll out, you know, to the general public, and you might be able to be involved in a treatment that will extend your life, and especially if you have a recurrence. So if you have a cancer recurrence, that'd be the first thing. If your cancer comes back, you should say, what clinical trials might be available for me? So clinicaltrials.gov is a wonderful website that you can search for your own clinical trials and where they're at and stuff too. So it's just extremely important if you have the opportunity to be on a clinical trial and you're not a guinea pig. And there are places, you know, Emory has that phase 1. And when you talk about clinical trials, there are different phases of clinical trials. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I am not the best person. I'll explain 1 and 4. All right. So 1 means it's a drug that usually has a number, letters and numbers. And so they're just testing it for major side effects. That is truly really kind of experimental work. When it gets to a 4, they're fine tuning things. They already know it works, and they're just fine tuning, you know, maybe how often it's given or different kind of things about it. So there's 2 other phases in between that also. But so like phase 1 is only done at certain hospitals. Like in my hospital, we don't do phase 1. We only do 3s and 4s. So, you know, we have clinical trials that are out there and drugs that are known to help, and maybe they're just fine tuning the delivery to maybe help whether it was symptom management, et cetera. So, but always ask. The doctor should ask, or consider it. So all of our patients, I can't say that with 100%, but we strive for all of our patients to be reviewed by our clinical trials team and to search for clinical trial opportunities, because we know that that's the best way to advance cancer care in our state and in our nation.
One of the things that I shared in the chat is, from my experience in working with other patients, that the doctors may not know about every single clinical trial that's out here. They may only share with what is at their hospital because that's what they know, or within their region. And so self-advocacy is really, really important when it comes to the clinical trials. And not all clinical trials are something based on a drug that you're actually taking. And that's another thing, to debunk the myth around clinical trials, that it's not just about a drug. It could also be about data or information as well. So, I just wanted to kind of add that piece in there, Angie. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm working on a massage therapy research project to assess I'm going to try to enroll some people in 2 different counties in Georgia to try to look at whether massage therapy helps symptom management. If it relieves anxiety, improves sleep, improves well-being on the patient side, the cancer survivor side, and on the caregiver side. Does it make them feel, are they feeling like they're helping their caregiver? Because sometimes we just can't always, if you're a caregiver on the webinar, we salute you, because without you, our patients and the nurses could not do our job. So our caregivers need attention too, that they need the tools that the best tools that they can have to help their loved one cope during their cancer treatments or their cancer journeys as survivors, long-term survivors. So I agree. I think that the supportive care trials, whether it's something for nausea or if it's acupuncture or if it's, whatever it is, that there are a lot of things that are out there to improve quality of life. I bet there's some neuropathy trials out there too, but don't know too much about them. But yes, so there are clinical trials that are out there that, again, not all institutions have a lot of clinical trials, open at the same time, or it might not even be for your kind of cancer. Say you have an odd cancer, a rare cancer, you might not have a clinical trial.
We have a question from the audience, Angie. Does the lack of a certain type of insurance preclude some women from participating?
That is, okay. So they look at every patient. So clinical trials, sometimes people think they're free, sometimes they're not free.
Right.
And so if they do have a cost associated with them, some insurances might not, but most insurances will, if they appeal or ask to speak to the medical liaison or whoever, the person that's in charge of approving things. We don't see that too often at my hospital, that insurance companies refuse clinical trial participation, but most of them do with the right evidence. And again, it kind of depends on what kind of trial. So if it's like maybe a phase 1 trial where it's really experimental, a brand new drug that they're testing out for symptoms and stuff, it might be way different than a phase 4 where, they're just getting everything, tidied up. So it would be very individualized, but I think that you could appeal, like Tiah said, you keep asking, you don't listen to no. I think that you could probably keep escalating that and get help.
Yeah. And this is where health equity comes into play, because you have to think about people who are on Medicaid. Most of the time, people who are on Medicaid, you won't see them involved in clinical trials because of the costs associated with it. And that's unfortunate. And this is where, we've talking about self-advocacy, but I think this is also where advocacy comes into play, where if we want to see health equity, then we need to make sure that, people have a fighting chance. It should not be determined by your insurance. If we want to see people survive, thrive, and live well, then we need to make sure that we're also advocating for these types of things. And then when you think about clinical trials too, sometimes the doctors may not, may assume, because you have a certain type of insurance that you may not qualify. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Don't take no for an answer. There may be organizations out here that provide support for those who are trying to get into a clinical trial. And then also with the clinical trials, just to debunk a myth, oftentimes you will hear and see and read that Blacks don't want to participate in clinical trials. And that's not necessarily true. Black people do want to participate in clinical trials. Oftentimes we don't fit the inclusion criteria because there may be comorbidities or things of that nature. And so that's, those are some of the reasons why you don't see enough Black people in clinical trials. But we are really, there's several women advocates, Black women who are advocates, as well as allies who are non-Blacks, are really pushing for this, because we want to make sure we're really trying to put a little bit of heat on industry to say, listen, you've got to make the clinical trials so that we can qualify. I had one young lady, and she's deceased now, and she was really fighting to get into a clinical trial, and she tried so many different ones, and they kept saying, you don't qualify, you don't qualify. Finally, when she qualified for one, they even changed some of the criteria to allow her to be included in the clinical trial. And when she sat down the day that she was supposed to start her chemo, sitting in the infusion chair, they came to her and they said, I'm sorry, but we messed up in the paperwork. You don't qualify.
Oh, wow.
I mean, how heartbreaking is that? And, shortly after she passed away, but how heartbreaking is that? So, we've got to do better as advocates and as industry. We've got to do better.
All right, so we're kind of drawing near the end. So I do want to just take a moment to wrap things up, but I want you all to share. I like what you said, Tiah, about your tool bag. Just share what are your top 2 to 3 resources that will be in your tool bag for self-advocacy?
Top 2, I think it's just my voice, making sure that I'm heard, not taking no for an answer, and also connecting with others. Sometimes the doctors may have not recognized a particular side effect or a symptom, or they may not have shared options with you. They may have made the decision for you. And so if you have conversations with others and do your own research, then you can come back to them to say, okay, this is what you're telling me, but this is also what I've learned. And I want to be able to make an informed decision, not just a decision based on what they're sharing with you, but all the cards are on the table. So I would say those would be the 2 things that are in my tool bag to help me with self-advocacy.
Bobbie, you want to go next?
Yeah, I would definitely, surround yourself with people that you trust. I would say reaching out to support groups or online platforms. I find it very helpful here in my community because most of us are local. So we share a lot of information with one another. So I would say support groups to help, where do I go? What do I ask? That's so important. And to take someone with you that's going to listen, because you're not going to hear everything.
And I'll say I'm not a cancer survivor, but I agree wholeheartedly with what Tiah and Bobbie said. Having that person that's an extra ear, because if you think about the Charlie Brown cartoon where the teachers wah wah wah, that's what ends up a cancer patient. When person hearing that diagnosis, that's what they describe sometimes. And as a nurse, sometimes I know what I've said to a patient and they'll come back the next day. Well, you didn't tell me that. And I'm like, okay, I really did, but they didn't hear it. There's just no way. Sometimes they just put that, it's like a force field. They put that force field up because to protect themselves, because there's only so much bad news or sad news they can handle. And so you give it to them in pieces. You ask them what they want to know. A good nurse will ask you what you would want to know right now. And then help you digest the materials, slowly but surely, ask you how you like to learn, You know, do you want this shared with your family? Do you have a friend? Do you want a recorded? Do you want all the online resources online now? Do you want, we've been doing, you know, tele-education, you know, like before your first chemo treatment. And, you know, that allows, because, you know, now people are coming in the clinic, but still we're not allowing a lot of visitors, you know, to come back with them. So it allowed, you know, your support person to be sitting right by you, hearing the same thing the nurse was saying. So it's trying to be agile and flexible for our new world and new issues, but having that person with you and recording things and not being afraid to ask a question, even if it sounds silly, and not to be afraid to say if you have a really unusual personal situation that you think a nurse could help you with. And nurses want to be your friends as far as helping you this journey. And if you think about a nurse, this is what I say to my new nurses too. You want to help a patient, you want to walk beside a person with cancer. You don't want to push them and you don't want to drag them. You want to walk right by their side and help them. It might not be what you choose or your exact path that you would take, but that is your role, is to walk with the person with cancer and not drag them or push them.
Yeah.
So that's my best advice to anybody, is a buddy with a nurse.
Yeah. One other thing I would say is also just have pen and paper with you, especially while you're sitting in that chair getting your treatment. You know, after you've gone in and talked to the doctor, just write down those notes while your mind's, you know, kind of digesting everything. Good old pen and paper.
Yep.
It works.
And I'll add to that, my mother was actually a caregiver for my brother who was having a heart transplant. And she would record the appointments with the doctor because they talk about so much and sometimes it goes over your head. So she would record the appointments, and then that way you can go back and reflect on those or look up things that they said. But you have all of that content there, so you can easily pull out your phone and just record the conversations. And Tiah says there are apps to record appointments too. So that's an even a better step up, so that you can probably name them and put dates by them. So that sounds really nice.
One thing I will add, if you don't mind, is making sure that when you are having these discussions with your doctor, you know, you talked about recording it, but also reading your records, reading your doctor's notes. Ask to see their notes, not just what's in the portal, but ask to see what the doctor has written in their notes. Because sometimes you'll find a mistake, and that one small mistake can cause you not to get the medications that you need or something else that you have a need for. So make sure that you're reviewing and reading and addressing any issues in the doctor's notes.
Thank you. So I do want to open the floor for questions from the audience to see if anyone has any questions for our panelists. Someone says, excellent point on reading the notes.
I think we answered them all, Katrina.
Okay, well, I will share these resources that we have. So let me go back. We do have additional resources. So along with everything that the ladies named today, we do have additional resources to share. And these will be shared in follow-up emails from this webinar so that you can access these. But we have lots of resources that will be helpful in the self-advocacy journey. We also have these beautiful brochures that Georgia Core produced about the unmet needs of cancer survivors and some practical ways to address those. So we have these on our website. You can actually access these by going to georgiacancerinfo.org/sure brochures. And my chat went away. Do you all see a question in there? I saw something pop up.
It just said great conversation.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. Thank you for creating a platform.
So next week we'll do this again, but we'll focus on self-advocacy after treatment. So for a lot of survivors that I talk to, a lot say that this is when the journey has really began for them. So life after that treatment is over. So we'll talk more about what that looks like for people and how you can advocate for yourself after you're no longer getting treatment. And if you'd like to connect with us, we have our website, georgiacancerinfo.org. You can also email us at info@georgiacorps.org. If you're interested in joining the Survivorship Advocacy Council, you can send me an email. And then we also invite you to like us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And you can find us at Georgia Center for Oncology, Research, and Education. And I think I saw a hand go up. Let's see. All right, Marquita, are you there?
I raised my hand in error.
Okay. All right. We thought we got lucky today. All right. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening and spending some time with us. You will receive a follow-up email from us with a short survey about the webinar, and you'll also receive the resources that we mentioned this evening. I would like to thank all of our panelists for your time tonight. I've learned so much from you, and we look forward to just sharing this information with everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks. Bye, ladies.
Bye.